We'd like to begin this morning, and our speaker here today is Sondra Miller. She's the president and CEO of the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center. And as some of you may be aware, the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center has a presence and office and has been very active here in Ashtabula County. And Sondra's going to share with us some of their work and partnerships here in the county and community, but also a lot about kind of building the awareness of what the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center does, but some things that we all need to be aware of and know more about our community and this very, very important topic and how we can help to support them and others. Sondra?
Good morning. I am really happy to be here with you, and I have to say, when people show up at this hour of the day to talk about rape and sexual abuse, I give you about 10 gold stars. I know this is a tough topic to talk about any time of the day, but especially when it's your first stop in what I'm sure is a very busy day. I'm also pretty sure that when this group invited me to speak a couple of months ago, you had no idea, I had no idea that our national news headlines would just be dominated by conversations about sexual assault. And it's been a bit of a whirlwind for us at Cleveland Rape Crisis Center in the past week. On Friday, the day after the hearings in Washington, we received a record number of phone calls and texts into our hotline, more than triple our daily average from last year. And last year was high because it was when the Me Too movement hit and a lot of people were reaching out. So it's been busy, to say the least. And I also know that it's not just the national headlines where we are hearing about sexual assault. It's also in our local headlines. And I know it can feel like Washington, D.C. is very far away. But I know that the news there and the news here impacts our neighbors and has a pretty big effect on people who are living next door, who are working next door to us. And while I am certainly not here to have any kind of a debate about our political processes, I think the one thing that unites all of us is that we want our neighbors and our family and our friends who live in this community to be safe and healthy and thriving and productive citizens. And I think that's our common goal for this morning and what I'm hoping to talk with you a little bit about. So many people are quite surprised to learn that about 10,000 people who live in Ashtabula County have been raped in their lifetime. And about a third of the people who are walking through the doors of Cleveland Rape Crisis Center are children under the age of 18. So the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the best research that we have about the prevalence of sexual assault is that it suggests that 1 in 5 women who live in Ohio are raped in their lifetime and 1 in 71 men. But we know that it's not just the survivors who live through the traumatic experiences that are impacted by this. We know that their partners, their children, their parents, their family members, their friends, their colleagues, and the community as a whole feels it when something traumatic happens. Sexual violence violates a person's trust and their feelings of safety, and it happens to people of all ages, all races, all professions, all incomes, all sexual orientations, all ethnicities. A sexual assault can impact a survivor's daily life, whether they were harmed last week, last year, or last decade. And every survivor reacts very different to trauma. They act in their own unique way, but they often carry the emotional scars over their entire lifetime. So common emotional reactions that we are talking to survivors about: feeling guilt, feeling shame, fear is a big one, numbness, feeling shocked, and feeling isolated. The psychological effects of sexual violence have been linked to long-term health risks. Many survivors can be diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. It's linked to eating disorders, anxiety, depression. There are studies that show that survivors of rape are about 3 times more likely to suffer from depression, 4 times more likely to contemplate suicide, and 26 times more likely to abuse alcohol or drugs. We know that untreated trauma can create lifelong barriers to success and health and well-being. There's physical impacts, there's personal injuries, there's pregnancy risks, there's risks for sexually transmitted infections, there's economic impacts, and the cost that the injury has, the medical expenses, the time that someone misses from work. And we know that sexual violence is the most underreported crime in our nation. So in all of the assaults that happen in our nation, just about 1/3 of them are reported to police. 2/3 of them never reported to any law enforcement or any formal authority, children's services, etc. So there's been a lot of conversation about why don't rape survivors come forward? Why don't they immediately go to the police and file a police report? There's many answers to that question as there are survivors of rape and sexual assault. But what we hear at Cleveland Rape Crisis Center, the number one reason that we hear that people report to us that they don't go forward is fear. And sometimes they're afraid of the perpetrator, or they're afraid of some kind of retaliation. Sometimes they've been threatened if they tell anyone, I'm going to do this to your family or your kids. I'm going to tell your parents. I have a picture of this. Do you really want your grandma to see it? Sometimes we hear that they're afraid that they're going to disappoint the people that they care about most. They're afraid that they're going to hurt their parents by sharing what has happened, hurt their kids, hurt their siblings, that the people around them that are their support system are going to look at them differently, and they don't want that to happen. And they're also afraid that when they do tell, the person that they trust with that information will not believe them. They sometimes worry that what happened to them was somehow their fault. So they fear that people might blame them for what they did do, what they didn't do, what they said, what they didn't say, who they told, who they didn't tell, what they wore, what they didn't wear, what they were driving, where they were walking, what hour of the night or the day or the afternoon or the morning that they were going about their daily lives. And a lot of people say, I just want to move forward with my life and I just want to pretend that this never happened. I want to go back to being the person that I was the day before this happened to me. That's who I want to be. And they do everything they can to try to forget and try to return to that person. Now, I know that what I'm talking about, I can feel the energy in the room. It's a pretty serious topic, and it can be really uncomfortable to talk about. But I also know that if we have any prayer of eradicating sexual assault from our community, we have to be willing to talk about these things. One of the conversations that is probably the hardest to talk about around this issue, and I do think it is so important, or I wouldn't bring it up here this morning, is rethinking our visual image of what a sex offender looks and acts like. So I think we have responded to the epidemic of sexual violence with the notions of sex offender registries. And I've been approached by legislators who say, shouldn't convicted sex offenders have to have green license plates on their car so we know who they are and can stay away from them? And I'm not suggesting that these things are bad ideas, but it sort of feeds into this hysteria that we have that sex offenders are these monstrous human beings, and they probably wear, dark-colored trench coats, and they're lurking in the alleys, and we need to, bring them out so we can see who they are. This idea that they look like boogeymen, or whatever that image that you have in your head. But unfortunately, people who commit these crimes, they look and act just like I do, just like you do, just like the people in this room and the people that we interact with every day. They often are charming, they're good-natured, and they often position themselves in a way so that others could not possibly believe that they've done something so heinous, except that they have. And their actions wreak havoc on the victims whom they've chosen to hurt. So 7 out of 10 rapes are committed by someone who's known to the victim. And when we're talking about child sexual abuse, it's actually 9 out of 10 perpetrators are someone known, acquaintances or family members. Perpetrators can be friends, they can be family, they can be people who hold positions of influence in the community. They stand in line in front of us at the grocery store. They sit behind us at church. They are even welcomed into our homes for our holiday and family celebrations. The epidemic of sexual violence will continue happening until we can shift our perspective and accept that some of the people that we know and love and trust are capable of harming other people in this way. And this next point is really important to hear. We know that 98% of perpetrators of sex crimes are men. And I also believe that 98% of men would never, ever, ever condone this kind of behavior. We know that survivors of sexual violence, that for them, what has happened stays with them for the rest of their lives. And that, frankly, is where Cleveland Rape Crisis Center comes in. So we are a safe and confidential place for women, for men, for children, to find some hope and some healing in their journey, regardless of how much time has passed since they were hurt. Our mission is to support survivors of rape and sexual abuse, promote healing and prevention, and advocate for social change. So I want to talk for just a minute about what happens when someone walks through the door at Cleveland Rape Crisis Center. And rather than talk about it, I think we're actually going to show just a couple minute video here that explains it much better than I could. Rachel's going to. This is always the opportunity for technical difficulties. So I'll hold our breath.
I was raped when I was 16 years old. I had no control. I told someone and he thought it was a joke. He laughed and said I asked for it. This was not the case. I never asked for this. I never told anyone again. But then I found a post on social media from Cleveland Rape Crisis Center that said, "We believe you."
I went to the hospital with my partner. Never did I realize my body would be a crime scene. The nurse explained the process while she collected evidence. She told me she was a SANE nurse, a nurse for victims of sexual assault. Then I spoke to the police officer and left. I have never heard from anyone about my case since that day. 20 years later, there was a knock at my door. I'm told my rape kit was tested and my rapist was identified. This stunned me. I suddenly flashed back to that day. What do I do now?
I told my teacher because I was afraid Mommy and Daddy wouldn't believe me. How could they believe someone we all love so much could do this to me? I didn't want to make Mommy cry. After I told, I felt better. I didn't think I would, but I did. Someone came to our house and asked me a lot of questions. She said she was my advocate and would always be by my side. My advocate helped me get ready for court. My advocate was always with me even when Mom and Dad couldn't be. She even sat with me in the courtroom so I could get my superpowers to tell everyone what happened to me. She told me I was very brave. I was glad when it was over, but still felt bad. So my advocate brought another person to our house. She said she was my therapist, and she would help me and Mommy and Daddy get through this.
I now know that I am not to blame for being raped.
No one is ever to blame for being raped.
Not as a child,
Not as a teenager,
Not as an adult.
regardless of race or sexual orientation.
today I feel strong from the inside.
I found the courage to continue on. Their love and support steadies me and strengthens me with a freedom I have not known in many years.
I am grateful to the women, men, and children who speak and sing out to give voice to this issue. Today I turn the page, ready to venture out into the world as a survivor because of the work I accomplished at the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center.
So for many, many years, we were an organization that exclusively focused on Cuyahoga County. And I have taken shifts on our hotline. Every employee who works for Cleveland Rape Crisis Center has probably done that at some point in time. And I answered calls from people who were 30 miles away, 40 miles away, 50, 60 miles away, and were still making plans to figure out how they could get downtown for a counseling appointment. So we started thinking about what we could do to make those services available closer to where people live. I knew for every one person who was making that call on the hotline and coming downtown for services, driving more than an hour for a 1-hour therapy appointment, I knew for every person making that call, there were 100 or more who were never going to be able to make that happen. So we followed the lead of Attorney General Mike DeWine. A number of years ago, he made a pledge and said we need at least basic rape crisis services available in all 88 counties in Ohio. I thought he was crazy when he made that pledge, I'll be honest with you. But as he put his plan together, he funded the opportunity for us to open an office. First, we just rented a single office inside of HomeSafe, the domestic violence agency working here. And HomeSafe has been our biggest partner and champion. And last year, in September, we opened our standalone office on State Road, proud to call the Lunchbox our neighbor. That office opened 1 month before the Me Too movement hit our nation, swept across our nation, and I was incredibly grateful that we were ready for that, and it didn't happen 1 month after Me Too hit, and we would have been sort of caught standing flat-foot. So we were ready to get those calls. You can see this is what the outside looks like, and we'll flip through a couple slides just to give you an idea of what it looks like on the inside. This is our waiting area. Also on our waiting area, because we do have a lot of kids that are coming in for appointments. This is what our talk therapy part of the office looks like. No couches. And I show this picture because art therapy and expressive therapy is a big part of what we do. So you'll find this in each of our offices. And there's some client artwork. So in our experience, as we've opened and also in Lake County and Geauga County, and a couple other new locations inside Cuyahoga, not everyone is excited to hear that a rape crisis center is opening in their community. I think there's somehow this idea that because the rape crisis center is here now, rape is going to happen more often, which, of course, there's such irony in that statement. But what we found in Ashtabula is complete welcoming attitude, and this notion that there are some big social ills facing our community, and we need all the help we can get to solve them. And so organizations and people and leaders have pulled up chairs for us at the table so we can be a part of that, and I do appreciate that. So far in 2018, we've provided services to 55 survivors in our Ashtabula office, and we've engaged 2,421 people through our education and training programs. But I am not just here to talk about what Cleveland Rape Crisis Center is doing. I also think it's important to highlight what so many of the partners and organizations in this community are doing alongside us. So of course, a shout out to HomeSafe, who was the first person, our first organization, and Sherry, the first person to welcome us and help us get that office open. They also collaborated with us earlier this year to do a community training on human trafficking, hosted at Jefferson at the high school, was it? was at the high school, right? We trained 100 people on how to identify and respond to sex trafficking. Our criminal justice partners in the Ashtabula County Prosecutor's Office and the Sheriff's Office, they have a victim services unit that we work alongside. Many of the local police departments are working alongside us to teach us about the community and the strengths of this community and help us understand what the greatest needs are. Ashtabula County Children's Services invited us to train 100 teachers on how to prevent violence and to help students do the same. And I need at least another hour to talk about how we prevent sexual abuse. Jessica, where's Jessica? Let's see where you're sitting right now. They're right there in front of me. I know the university here is working on a Green Dot program that is all about preventing violence, nationally known evidence-based curriculum. I'm so happy to see that this is happening. So if you're interested in the prevention side of the work, please see Jessica. Lake Erie Recovery Services is partnering with us to host a trauma and education group where men and women in recovery can explore the role that trauma has played in their addiction. And we've had several people move from that, once they go through the support group, then start coming to our Center for Individual Services. The Ashtabula County YMCA Community Counseling Center, the District Library, Ashtabula County Community Action Agency have all opened doors for us and welcomed us into the neighborhood. We're proud to do this alongside so many already amazing organizations, and we feel like working together is the best way that we can help survivors to recover, heal, and thrive. I think here are some of the places we've been showing up this year. If you've seen us, the medical clinic. We've done a lot of events here on campus. Thank you. Rotary Club, library. And so I want to end with giving each of you a couple of nuggets, because you might be sitting in here saying, I'm not a survivor, I don't know any survivors, I don't work in social work, I don't know how, I don't know what I'm supposed to do about it. So, but I would argue that everybody can do something, and it takes all of us working together to support survivors and promote prevention. So my first, one of three pieces of advice I'd leave with you is first to start by believing survivors when they come forward. If someone you know shares this information with you, you should feel very honored that they trust you with the information. Survivors report to us that they're very careful about who they do and don't tell. If someone tells you that they've been hurt, a very simple response is to say, I am sorry this happened to you and you did not deserve it. Put our hotline number, our website in your phone contacts in case someone you know ever might have a reason to call. You can invite us to speak at your church, at your school, at your community group, at your Rotary Club. We do educational presentations. We do things targeted to young people. We use a bystander intervention approach, but we are here to break the silence around sexual violence, and we would be honored if you would invite us in. And three, the last thing that I would leave you with is for the children that you have in your life, the children and teenagers, one of the most powerful things you can do is talk to them about this. And I know that is not easy. And my famous line is, I know this is an uncomfortable conversation, but we are going to have it anyway. I have a 3-year-old and a 10-year-old at home right now. When my 10-year-old was about 3, as I was bathing her, I started talking with her about private parts, and your private parts are what's covered by your bathing suit, and if anybody touches your private parts, you're supposed to put up your hand and you're supposed to say, stop, private parts. And we practiced it, every once in a while, until one night, it's late at night, I'm trying to get through bath and get to bedtime, and I said, so what do you do if somebody touches your private parts? And she says, stop, credit cards. I thought, okay, this is why we practice. So we have a lot of tips on our website about how to have this conversation in an age-appropriate way, whether you're talking to a 3-year-old or a 10-year-old or an 18-year-old or a college student going off to campus. As I said before, I feel strongly that in order to stop sexual violence from happening, we must be willing to break through the silence. And I also believe that together is the only way we can make it possible for sexual assault survivors to recover and heal and thrive. So thank you very much for having me here this morning. I am happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Do you know how frequency of this heinous crime has changed in the digital era?
How has the frequency of sexual assault changed in the digital era? I do not believe that sexual violence is happening any more today than it was 10 or 20 years ago. I do believe that what was happening under the rug in the shadows is now happening online. And so there's some evidence, there's actually, it makes it easier for us to even see some signs of things that might be going down an unhealthy path. I would say the internet has made sex trafficking in particular very public. I mean, it's wide out in the open, whereas it used to happen quietly on street corners and so forth. Now it is right on websites for everyone to see.
I don't have a question, just a comment. I live in this community, have for a long time. I work in Lake County at a small private college, and I've been affiliated and working with CRCC for quite a few years. And I remember meeting with Rachel down at the Perk a handful of years ago when she said we're going to have a facility in Ashtabula, and I was just beaming. So we all should be so grateful that we have their services right in our community. And as we leave today, tell 5 people of how you started your morning, because that is how we educate. We get people connected to the services. You've heard the statistics. It is, to say it's real is an understatement. So just as a supporter, a partner, and a proud member of this community, I hope we all leave today spreading this conversation.
Thank you.
I'm having a little trouble. I think I'm missing something. You cited the statistic that 98% of perpetrators are men. And then you said 98% of men would never condone that. So what I think I'm hearing again is your point that there's just a small group of monsters, and I can't quite reconcile that.
Yeah, I do think it's a small number of people who are committing a very large number of crimes, and there is, sex offender management is one of the most under-researched areas that we have in this nation, but there is quite a bit of evidence that says one person is creating harm with multiple victims. And in fact, one study in particular says on average, a perpetrator will have at least 14 victims. And even in Cuyahoga County, where if you have seen in the news, there were thousands of untested sexual assault kits, and that has provided law enforcement and criminal justice professionals with the opportunity to sort of look at crime statistics sort of historically and say, like, what did we miss that this is happening? And what they missed is that there were serial offenders that, at least in the cases that are known about, had 5 victims, 7 victims, 14 victims. I think one even had 18 victims. You still look confused.
Yeah, I do. I'm thinking about, there's a lot of perpetrators who only do it once. Well, maybe it's a crime of opportunity. Maybe it's drank too much. That's the cultural boys will be boys conversation we're trying to have. So I am still a little confused, but I understand what you're saying.
I do think that there probably are perpetrators who have only committed the crime once. I also think that perpetrators sometimes start with, lower level types of sex crimes. And if they're not caught, if it's not reported, they get better at their craft. They start escalating their behavior. So of course there are perpetrators who are not serial offenders, but I think more often than not, more serial in nature.
And you have to think about all the rape kits that don't turn up a match.
Exactly. Yes?
Can you make a mention of consent, or speak a little bit to consent? Because I think sometimes that is deferred with consent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so consent, especially when we're talking with young people are most often learning about sexual relationships through fiction, through movies, through TV shows, through books. And there's it's just not very Hollywood to say, are you comfortable? Are you okay with what we're doing? And so a lot of our conversations with young people are about how to navigate that with college students. How to navigate that conversation. And I think the advice we share with people is if you are not getting affirmative answers, it's not consent. We also are talking to students that just because you consent to maybe going to second base doesn't mean you're consenting to any kind of behavior under the sun. You always have the power to withdraw that consent, always. All right. Well, good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much for being here this morning and for being in our community. I think the statistics are stunning, and I think sometimes when we hear statistics like that, it kind of paralyzes us, but I appreciate the suggestions for what we as community members can do to help. So carry that message with you today. I think we have some students here this morning. Jessica, do you have students with you? Welcome to our students. Thank you for being here this morning. I have just a couple of announcements. We will be hosting the Heart Walk this Saturday on our campus. So it starts at 8 o'clock. You don't have to really be here right at 8 o'clock. But we kind of kick things off. And because we're renovating the auditorium, we're not using the gym, so we'll start in the Blue Gold Room, and then hopefully it won't rain on Saturday morning, and we'll walk around the campus. But we're usually done with the Heart Walk by 10 or 10:30, so it's a nice way to start your Saturday morning. Lori Johnson is here this morning. I want to just recognize Lori for her service as at the Ashtabula Chamber. So thank you, Lori, for everything you've done at the Chamber for the community, and best wishes in your new position. So. And then my last announcement is that we will be hosting a Take Back the Night event here on campus on October 18th and at 7 o'clock in the evening. We will be starting in the Huggins Lecture Hall in the Robert S. Morrison building. The purpose of the night is to raise awareness of domestic violence, and then we'll finish the evening with a candlelight walk on campus and the dedication of a tree in memory of our student Randall Al-Dulami. So we'll be getting publicity out about that event, but it is October 18th. Okay, thank you all for being here, and we will see you in November. Have a good morning. Thank you.